It happened in a house filled with laughter, candlelight, and the smell of rosemary roast. But the moment my daughter-in-law leaned in and whispered into my ear, the entire world shifted. The baby isn't Judd's. It's someone you know very, very well. My name is Margaret Holloway. I'm 66, a retired high school English teacher from rural Georgia. I've spent most of my life setting tables, folding laundry with lavender sheets, and listening to the silence between words, because that's where the truth often hides. That evening, our dining room looked like something out of a Southern Living catalogue: polished silver, china from my wedding day, a fire flickering behind the glass, crackling like quiet secrets. My son Judd sat to my left, grinning like a boy, his hand resting on the small of his wife's back. And Lilia, his wife of 3 years, looked radiant, not just glowing, but victorious. She wore a pale silk dress that clung like a second skin, and every gesture of hers felt staged, like a woman auditioning for something larger than herself. Cedric, my husband of 43 years, sat across from me. He barely touched his food. His eyes never quite met mine. He kept swirling his wine as if looking for answers in the bottom of the glass. And then Lilia leaned in. Her lips brushed my ear. Her perfume vanilla and something sharper cut through the air like a blade. Her voice was calm, precise. "Don't worry, Margaret. You'll come to love this baby, even if he doesn't belong to your son." The room stayed the same, but I changed, and nothing that followed was ever the same again. You don't spend 4 decades beside a man without learning how silence speaks. Cedric and I were never loud people. We didn't shout or slam doors. We lived our life like an old song, steady, familiar, the kind you hum without realizing. 43 years of Sunday pancakes, quiet front porch evenings, shared glances across church pews. I used to think that kind of consistency was safety. Our son Judd was the best part of that life, born late after 3 miscarriages. He was our miracle, our anchor. Kind, bookish, the kind of boy who still called me mama well into adulthood. And when he brought Lilia home 3 years ago, I wanted to believe he had found someone who could love him with the same gentle certainty I did. But from the beginning, something in Lilia didn't sit right. She was flawless on paper, elegant, articulate, generous with compliments. But her compliments often felt studied, too precise. Her smile reached her lips, but never her eyes. And whenever she laughed at Cedric's old jokes, it felt like applause in an empty theatre meant for someone else. Then there were the glances, quick flickering moments between her and my husband, not lingering enough to accuse, but enough to make me question the edges of things I thought were solid. It was like walking across a floor you've swept 1,000 times only to suddenly hear it creak in a place it never did before. You stop. You listen. And something in your chest tells you that board's been hiding a crack. People don't change overnight, but the way they look at you does. The days after that dinner felt like living inside a play where everyone knew their lines, except me. I began noticing things I used to overlook, not because they weren't there before, but because I had trusted the people making the noise behind the curtain. Conversations would stop the moment I entered a room, replaced by thin smiles and too cheerful tones. Cedric, who once never left the house past 7, suddenly had errands after dark. Hardware store, he'd say. Needed mulch, he'd mumble. At 72, a man who once napped through movie nights was now restless after sundown. Then there was Lilia. She started dropping by during weekdays, always when Judd was at work. Just bringing some banana bread, she'd chirp, or thought you might need help folding laundry. But she never stayed long, and whenever I offered her tea or asked about the baby, she'd flash that perfect smile, tight as ribbon, on a box I wasn't allowed to open. I walked through our home, past the framed family photos, the quilt I sewed the summer Judd turned 10, the creaking spot near the pantry, and felt like a guest in someone else's life. The house was still mine. The furniture hadn't moved. The clocks still chimed at the right hour. But the warmth had thinned. The people I loved most had started performing, and I couldn't tell if I was the audience or the punchline. Something sacred was slipping, and I could feel it in the walls. Sometimes the truth doesn't shout. It waits in a drawer tucked beneath the ordinary. It was a Wednesday morning when Cedric left early for his checkup. I lingered upstairs longer than usual, drawn to his study, a room I rarely entered out of habit and respect. But something that day tugged at me. Maybe it was the silence, or maybe it was the quiet ache of knowing I no longer recognized the man whose handwriting I'd memorized decades ago. The desk was immaculate, always was. Pens lined up like soldiers' notepads, stacked by size, nothing ever out of place. But beneath a pile of gardening magazines in the bottom drawer, I found an envelope marked only with our address. Inside were 6 bank statements from an account I didn't know existed. Not joint, not shared, just his name. Each page was a mirror cracked down the middle. Large deposits, $5,800, even $12,000 appeared with no pattern. Then withdrawals, always in cash, round numbers, regular as a heartbeat. There were no explanations, no notes, just numbers that didn't belong to the rhythm of our life. I took pictures with trembling hands, careful not to leave a trace. Then I returned everything exactly as I'd found it. The room looked the same when I left, but I wasn't. That night, I made chicken pot pie just like always. Cedric complimented the crust. I smiled. But inside, a quiet certainty took root. He was hiding something. Have you ever felt like you were living inside a story, only to realize you're the only one who never read the script, because that's exactly how it felt? Secrets don't always hide in locked drawers. Sometimes they grow in plain sight between rose bushes and freshly turned soil. Marcus had been our gardener for almost a year. Quiet, respectful, early to arrive, early to leave. The kind of man who'd tip his cap without saying much, but whose eyes held a kind of softness you don't often see in men who work with their hands. There was something gentle in him, something almost burdened. That Thursday morning, I watched from the kitchen window, coffee in hand, as Lilia strolled out toward the garden. She moved like she belonged. Flowing dress sunglasses too big for the cloudy sky, a confident sway that always felt a bit too rehearsed. Marcus was kneeling near the roses, trimming deadheads with careful focus. When she approached, he stood. She said something I couldn't hear through the glass, but I saw her hand reach into her purse and pull out an envelope. She held it out. He hesitated, then took it. Not like someone accepting a thank you note, but like someone accepting a secret. Marcus looked around, shoulders tense, eyes darting. Then he tucked the envelope quickly into his jacket pocket and returned to pruning as if the roses might erase what had just happened. From inside the house, I stood frozen. That envelope may as well have been a flare in the dark. I didn't know what it meant, not yet. But the moment branded itself in my memory like hot iron on cotton. And I knew. This garden held more than flowers. It was growing something else entirely. You can hear your child smile through the phone, and you can hear when that smile is trying to hide something. Judd called on a rainy Tuesday, his voice a little too bright. "Hey, Mum, just checking in," he said like he always did when something was wrong. I asked about the baby. He gushed cribs names, nursery colours. He said Lilia was glowing. But in between his sentences, I heard it hesitation, shallow breath, the slight tremble of someone holding something back. Then he said it. "She told Dad before she told me. About the pregnancy." I paused. "She what?" Judd chuckled nervously. "Yeah, weird, right? Said she needed his advice before bringing it up to me, that she was nervous how I'd react. I guess. I haven't exactly been myself lately." That's when it clicked. I could almost hear the sound of glass cracking across my mind. My son, the one who used to cry if he thought he disappointed me, was tangled in something he didn't even understand. After we hung up, I sat in the den, staring at a photo of Judd, at 6 missing teeth, scraped knees holding a paper ribbon from his school spelling bee. He had always been tender, always trying to make things right, even if it meant carrying too much on his own back. Just like Cedric. Judd didn't need a wife. He needed a lifeline. And the thought lodged itself in my throat like a stone. Was he repeating his father's mistakes? Or worse, was he paying for them? Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, my son's voice echoed in my ears, and I felt something shift again. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about saving what was left before it broke completely. Some confessions don't come with words. They come in body language, sharp, sudden, unguarded. It was just past 8:30 when I stepped onto the back porch, drawn by the low murmur of voices beneath the hum of our motion light. The garden was cloaked in that kind of silver glow that makes shadows look like secrets, and there they were, Lilia and Marcus, standing near the tool shed, framed in flickering light, like actors mid-scene in a tragedy. Marcus looked worn, shoulders hunched, hands stuffed deep in his jacket like he was trying to hold himself together. Lilia, by contrast, stood tall, her voice sharp enough to pierce the night. I couldn't hear every word, but I caught enough. You said you'd help. I didn't sign up for this, Marcus said, his voice breaking. You knew what this meant, she hissed. You can't back out now. He turned away, fists clenched, shaking his head like a man trying to shake loose a noose. But Lilia grabbed his arm, not tenderly, not in fear, but like someone holding leverage. That wasn't affection. That was pressure. I stepped back into the shadows, heart pounding. At that moment, I didn't know what deal had been made. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Marcus was trying to leave something, and Lilia was fighting like hell to keep him in it. For the first time, I realized someone else might be trapped in this mess. And maybe, just maybe, he wanted out as badly as I did. Is the baby yours? The words came out colder than I intended, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Cedric stood at the sink, rinsing his coffee mug like we were just two retirees ending a quiet morning. But something in his posture froze. He didn't answer right away, didn't look at me, just set the cup down carefully like it might shatter if touched too hard. Then finally he turned his eyes red around the edges, not from tears, but from holding them back too long. No, he said, voice hoarse. It's not mine. But he didn't offer relief. He didn't explain. He just stood there, hollow and tired, like a man dragging a secret through wet cement. And I saw it then, clear as day. He wasn't protecting himself. He was protecting someone else, someone younger, someone more fragile. And suddenly I knew. He wasn't the flame. He was the shield. Cedric looked like a man holding a live grenade, arms wrapped around it, waiting for it to explode, praying no one else would get hurt. But the fuse was already burning down, and his silence wasn't saving anyone anymore. It was just prolonging the damage. I didn't press. Not then. Because part of me feared the truth he was carrying wasn't just about betrayal. It was about sacrifice. And sacrifice has a weight that bends even the strongest backs. Some truths don't come through confrontation. They fall quietly out of a forgotten purse and land behind a toilet. It was almost comical, really. I had gone upstairs to turn off the light Lilia always forgot in the guest bathroom. A little habit of hers, leaving things glowing after she left, like breadcrumbs marking territory. I leaned down to pick up what I thought was a loose cotton pad on the floor, but what I found instead was a long white envelope, slightly creased, tucked just behind the baseboard. No name. No note. Just clinical stillness. Inside a single page from Gene Track Laboratories. A prenatal DNA test. The words were cold, scientific, nothing dramatic, but to me they read like thunder. Alleged father Judd Michael Holloway, excluded. Probability of paternity 0%. Alleged father Marcus Daniel Santos, not excluded. Probability of paternity 99.7%. There it was, in black and white. The baby Lilia so proudly paraded as Judd's didn't belong to my son, or to my husband. It was Marcus's. I sat down on the closed lid of the toilet paper in hand, heart pounding, but oddly what I felt wasn't rage. It wasn't even betrayal. It was a relief, like someone had finally turned on the lights in a room I'd been wandering through in the dark. The guessing was over. No more paranoia. No more reading between glances and late-night errands. The truth had come not with a scream, but with a piece of paper left where secrets go to hide. And now I know, not just what had happened, but what I had to do next. If truth had a scent that Sunday, it smelled like roast chicken, lemon, thyme, and reckoning. I prepared the house the way I used to when Judd was little, and Christmas still meant something. I polished the silver until it caught the light like glass. I ironed the linen tablecloth, the one from our wedding registry, used only on days when love was supposed to feel permanent. I set out the china with the pale blue rim and gold trim, the kind that made everyone sit a little straighter. But this wasn't a celebration. This was a ceremony, a farewell to illusion. Judd arrived first, carrying a bottle of sparkling cider, and that big, hopeful smile that always made my heart ache. Lilia followed, glowing in soft beige silk, one hand resting on her small bump like a queen expecting tribute. Cedric, quiet as ever, kissed my cheek and sat at the head of the table, eyes lowered. We talked through appetizers. I let them fill the room with safe conversation, baby names, garden renovations, Lilia's cravings. I refilled water glasses, nodded at the right places. I waited. And when the plates were cleared, when the hush of digestion settled in, and Judd leaned back in his chair content, I stood up without a word. I walked to the sideboard and returned with a single envelope. No flair, no theatrics, just quiet certainty. I placed it gently in front of Lilia's setting and looked her in the eye. She didn't move. Her fingers tightened around her fork. I smiled, not cruelly, not smug, just the smile of a woman who has finally stopped guessing. And I said softly, "I believe you left this in the bathroom." There are moments in life when time doesn't just slow down, it holds its breath. Judd picked up the envelope with a puzzled look, his thumb tracing the crease in the flap. He opened it, read, then read again. His smile faltered, his jaw clenched, and slowly the color drained from his face like someone pulling a curtain on the sun. "Marcus Santos," he whispered. "What is this?" Cedric stood, his voice thick with regret. "She manipulated you, son. She used your debts, your shame to trap you. And when I found out, I let her pretend it was me." Judd stared at him, shattered. "You took the blame for an affair that never happened. I thought I was protecting you," Cedric said quietly. "From her, from yourself." Lilia didn't scream. She didn't beg. She just sat there, stiff and pale, the mask slipping inch by inch, until all that remained was fear. Not the fear of being caught. No, this was deeper. This was the fear of no longer being in control. I rose, walked to the door, and opened it. "It's time," I said softly. Lilia stood, gathering what was left of her pride. No words, no apologies. Just a long, final glance at the family she thought she could rewrite. As she stepped outside, I said the only thing I needed her to hear: "I'm not here to destroy you. I'm here to return the truth to where it belongs. And if it had been you at that table, holding that truth, what would you have done? Have you ever stayed silent just to protect someone already breaking inside comment on the city you're watching from?" I'd like to know how far this story has reached. 6 months later, a photo arrived in the mail with no return address, just a familiar slant of handwriting and a soft Arizona postmark. Inside was a picture of a baby boy swaddled in a pale blue blanket, dark hair, wide, thoughtful eyes that looked like they'd already seen too much of the world. And those eyes, my God, they were Marcus's. No doubt, no question. The child wore the truth like a birthmark. On the back of the photo, in careful script, his name is David. Thank you for giving me a second chance. Lilia. I stared at that photo for a long time, not with bitterness, not with anger, but with something like peace. Because while some endings crash like glass, others land like snow, quiet, gentle, and undeniable. Judd started attending Gamblers Anonymous. He's rebuilding slowly, honestly. His eyes carry more weight now, but they also carry depth. Cedric writes every morning, filling notebooks with reflections he once buried beneath silence. And me, I walk lighter. I've learned the difference between carrying pain and clinging to it. Forgiveness didn't come wrapped in a bow. It came in moments, quiet ones. Watching Cedric fall asleep without flinching, hearing Judd laugh and mean it, sitting on the porch with no need to explain anything to anyone. And I've come to believe this forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's setting down a weight that was never yours to carry forever. So if you're listening, don't wait for betrayal to chase truth. Don't fear the breaking, because sometimes the real healing starts when we stop pretending everything's fine. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is finally look at what hurts and stay in the room anyway.